Hi, this is Lori and I'm back again with my Whip It Puppy training. We are on week 2, lesson 1, and we're going to tackle a big topic, and that is jumping. Jumping seems to be ubiquitous in every puppy that you have, and Whip It puppies are especially good at it. They're right on top of you before you can even think or say anything. They're very agile, and gosh, you know, they don't weigh a lot, their paws aren't too messy, and I love them, so we have a tendency to kind of forget about it or sometimes just kind of ignore it. But the problem runs when you have children or you have other people and you don't want your dog jumping on other people or children because it can scare them or can actually hurt them. So it's a good idea when your puppy is young to start teaching them not to jump. Now, why is it so hard to teach a puppy not to jump? Well, there are a lot of reasons, and I'm going to talk about them right now. First of all, there are 2 contributing factors to jumping. First of all, excitability. Your dog's excited to see you. When you first get home or when you're doing things like kids are running around, it gets them kind of revved up, and sometimes the jumping behavior is just a matter of the fact that they're excited and they want to do something and you're a target. So in managing jumping, you have to manage excitability first. You have to intervene before they actually start thinking about jumping. Try to lower the threshold of jumping. The second thing is the actual jumping behavior. Dogs jump because they're reinforced for jumping. How are they reinforced? First of all, eye contact. We talked about this the other day, is that your puppies view eye contact generally as something positive, and they try to seek it, and they'll repeat behaviors to get eye contact. You know, we started teaching our puppies to look at us on command. Okay, so eye contact is good. So when a dog jumps on you, you'll notice the first thing that usually happens is when he's excited, you come home and you're thinking about, do I stop him from jumping, is you look down at them. So that's eye contact. So in order to make eye contact, they'll look up, and to get closer to your eyes, they'll jump up. The second thing is physical contact. Touch is very reinforcing to dogs, especially puppies. They want to make that contact, that connection with you, especially if you've been gone all day and they missed you. Just like somebody gives a hug, a puppy gives a jump. So those are the 2 aspects or contributing factors to jumping that you need to think about. Another thing I want you to think about is that the best time to intervene for jumping generally is before they jump, when they're thinking about it. And how do you know a puppy is thinking about it? Go back to eye contact. If you watch a puppy when you first walk up to him and he's thinking about jumping, he's looking up to make eye contact. There's also a trigger distance. And you'll notice this when you approach dogs. Try kind of restraining your dog, and I'll show you how to do a tether, and walk up to him, and you will see there's a certain point where they start thinking about jumping, they're looking up, they're getting on their back feet. Okay, that's a trigger distance. So if you want to prevent jumping, the things that you want to look at are, first of all, decreasing excitability or excitement. Secondly, noticing the trigger distance and identifying it, because you want to intervene at that point before they jump. And then third, how do you actually circumvent the actual jumping behavior? You know, and there are many ways to do that. And we'll talk about some different ways. We'll talk about management, which is actually sometimes physically or just managing your dog's position so that he doesn't get the opportunity to jump. Another way is to use what's called, it's actually called negative punishment, but really what it is it's figuring out ways not to reinforce the jumping behavior. And then third, positively reinforcing something else, an alternate behavior. In other words, instead of jumping, can we have him do something else? So those are a couple things we're going to talk about. Now, the last piece of this initial video is talking about punishment, because a lot of people will be trained, or a lot of trainers will talk about punishing for jumping. And the typical methods of punishment are raising your knee up. You know, you've heard that. Dog starts to jump, pick up your knee, catch him at the chest, push him off. Another thing is, I've seen some trainers say just step back and kind of squinch on their back toes. When they jump up, hold them, push on their back toes until it hurts, and then they learn that it hurts when they jump. Another way is just pushing them down or pushing them away and telling them no, yelling at them. Now, what's the problem with punishment? First of all, with any kind of physical or verbal punishment, it's got to be enough to make the dog think, I'm not doing that again. So here's how the scenario goes. Dog's excited to see you, you come home, they want to greet you, and they're punished. What's the response in a Whippet puppy? I'm not going within 100 miles of him when he comes to me. So what happens the next time your puppy gets loose somewhere and you're trying to get him to come, and he's thinking, you know what, before when I came and jumped on him, he yelled at me or he pushed me off and he hurt me. I'm not sure if I always want to come. So Whippets are very sensitive to anything negative or punitive. And so you want to avoid it for that reason alone, is that it can make your dog not trust you or be afraid of you. The other thing that's really important is these methods are really difficult to do in puppies because they're fast. So if you were going to lift your knee and try to catch them in the chest, you know what? It's really easy to get them in the gut. It's easy to get them in the rib. It's easy when they're going 100 miles an hour and they spring up at you to knock them backwards and have them fall and break their leg or hurt their neck or something else. You know, you really risk physically hurting your dog. And I'll tell you, a vet bill is no fun from something that you've done. But even more than that, we're not here to hurt our dogs. You know, I'd rather have my dogs jump all over me than hurt them. So you want to avoid any kind of physical punishment. Now, one thing I will say is there have been times where I take them and I'll restrain them. But that's not the same as punishing them. You know, I'm actually just managing them physically so that I can reinforce some other kind of behavior, but I'm not trying to make it punishment. So I want you to take it out of your repertoire as far as jumping. Punishment really doesn't work well at all in this respect. Now, the next time that we talk about jumping, we're also going to talk a little bit more before we bring the dogs in, but I'm going to talk about some ways that different techniques that we can use to manage jumping. And we're also going to talk about two different types of jumps. There's jumping on you, and then there's jumping on other people. And you do manage them sometimes a little bit differently because you can do some things with your puppy that work, but you can't expect other people to train your dog, and you can't expect other people to respond. In other words, if people come over to your house and say, oh, you know, just tell them no or just do this. Well, if it's anything that involves something really physical or something where they have to know something about training, it doesn't work. And it certainly doesn't usually work with kids because kids don't respond very well to dogs that are going to jump. They have a tendency to kind of jump back or turn the other way, and they actually trigger that behavior. So when you're working with jumping, you want to look at how can you personally start training your dog to jump at home, and then secondly, how can you help manage jumping when you have contact with visitors into your home or you're somewhere on leash, you know, you've got your dog on leash and you take him into a public place. So we'll talk about that next. See you next for the next lesson.